Hey there, this is Bobby Jones, and as some of you may have noticed, I've been running a lot of flashback episodes lately. The reason for that is that I've recently had a family emergency that our family's been dealing with, so I was forced to reschedule some interviews and episodes along the way. Don't worry, everything is good on my end, and I will have more new episodes for you starting this Thursday. However, it's always useful to have more guests on the show. So if you know someone who has a side gig or does something cool outside of the workplace, make sure you point them in my direction. I look forward to continuing with the great guests and content in the future. But now, on with the show. Welcome to the Plan B CRNA podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Jones, and I'm so excited that you're here. The Plan B CRNA podcast is the only show made specifically for nurse anesthetists who are exploring options outside of their traditional career paths. This is the place to expand your mind and your goals as we uncover new ways to produce side income together. Join me for some honest, unscripted discussions with other CRNAs who are transforming their financial lives. This episode is brought to you by On-Call Capital. On-Call Capital is dedicated to educating CRNAs and other healthcare providers about investing outside of the traditional stock market. On-Call Capital also provides opportunities for you, yes, you, to create passive income and generational wealth while also lowering your taxable income through investments in the apartment and alternative investment spaces. If you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure you do that right now so that you don't miss an episode. Thanks so much for joining me today. And now, on with the show. Welcome to another Provider Spotlight episode of the Plan B CRNA podcast. My guest today is a fellow CRNA podcaster who created an online education business to help pay down student loan debt and provide himself with some extra income. Now his Plan B has become his Plan A, as his side hustle income now exceeds his previous full-time CRNA income. Lieutenant Commander Jason Duprat is a nurse anesthetist and Navy Reserve officer turned serial entrepreneur. He's the founder of Ketamine Academy, co-founder of the IV Therapy Academy, and founder of the Healthcare Entrepreneur Academy. Jason is also the host of the Healthcare Entrepreneur Academy podcast, a show with over 200 episodes devoted to inspiring, motivating, and educating healthcare professionals on their quest to become successful healthcare business owners. I'm excited to have you on the show today, Jason. Thanks for being here.
Awesome, Bobby. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to chatting with you.
Absolutely. Now, I kicked around the idea of starting a ketamine clinic myself when I was practicing, and I just never really got into exploring it. This was probably 5 or 6 years ago. So, how did you get started? And what did that look like at the time that you were getting started?
Yeah, so I got started back in 2017. So back then, ketamine for treatment-resistant depression and various mental health issues was really still pretty novel. The first literature started to come out in 2000, but as with a lot of things, medical literature, it takes a lot of years for it to finally start to get implemented into medical practice in a lot of situations. So that was the case with ketamine, certainly. And so basically, I was in Albuquerque at the time when I got started. Before I had moved to Albuquerque from Florida, I had a friend of a friend who he was an ER physician, and they're pretty comfortable with ketamine. They administer ketamine quite a bit in the ER. And so he was going to start his ketamine clinic in Texas, but he wanted a CRNA anesthesia provider's perspective on administering ketamine low dose outpatients. So that sort of got the wheels a churning. That was probably back in late 2015, early 2016. And that really sparked the idea for me, because at that point, I'd never heard of ketamine being used for mental health issues. I did have my mom who had suffered tremendously from really severe depression. So it kind of sparked my interest because of that, and because we administer it quite frequently as CRNAs. And so I started to look into it. Once I moved to Albuquerque, after talking to him, I started doing some research, looking into the laws. New Mexico is much more friendly for nurse anesthetists as far as regulations go. So there's just collaborative practice over there, so you can own your own businesses, and there's a lot more opportunities. So I figured, even though we were only there on a 3-year plan to pay off student loans for the job that I had taken, I decided, why not? Why not start a ketamine practice? I want to figure this out. And we still decide to move, at the end of 3 years. no harm, no foul. I've learned a whole lot. I'll hopefully be able to help a lot of patients, and I can take what I've learned and maybe apply it to Florida if we go back to Florida to return. So that's what I did. I spent actually about a year researching, and it was a massively time-consuming endeavor. I read every ketamine book that there is, every article, journal, or journal article I could get my hands on, and eventually, once JAMA Psychiatry published their consensus guidelines in 2017, that was when I was like, okay, now this is really becoming mainstream. You've got a major authority, publishing some guidelines on how to do this properly. Now I feel comfortable, because before, ketamine has a stigma to it. Literature was there, but kind of sparse. And I was waiting for that sort of go ahead. When I saw that journal article, I was like, boom, now's the time. So I implemented that protocol in our clinic, and basically the rest is history. So that's sort of how we got started. We started a small little practice. We were only about 800 square feet. We had initially just one open space, quickly built out a private infusion room. We built out, a wall to sort of divide out a waiting area. So we started really lean. We weren't really sure how successful it would be. And so we wanted to keep our costs down as little as possible to make sure that we weren't going to lose a whole bunch of money if it didn't take off. But fortunately for us, it took off pretty fast. So within just a few months, we had recouped all of our startup expenses, and then we're starting to become profitable, which was awesome.
Wow. Very cool. So now, you mentioned the amount of legwork that went into actually doing the research and whatnot. What were some of the other speed bumps you came across along the way to opening up?
Yeah, so most of it is around the regulations, trying to search through all the different boards and departments to figure out what the regulations are. So it's phone calls with boards of pharmacy, calling the boards of nursing, coming up with contracts, figuring out how to, whether you're required to be HIPAA compliant or not, if you're a self-pay practice. There's a lot of intricacies that go into starting a self-pay practice, or any practice really. The regulatory hurdles are by far the biggest ones to really dive into. You have to do a ton of research, and ideally consult an attorney. Yep. Yeah.
Now, you obviously have to keep track of that now, being that you have your own educational program. What has that process been like, researching all of that for possibly different states and different locations?
Yeah. So again, super challenging. Different states put different regulations in various random spots. So there's all sorts of different names for different boards in different states. So it's certainly, challenging to try and keep up with all of that. Regulations are constantly changing, usually for the better, actually almost always for the better, as far as increased scope of practice, increased autonomy, increased independent practice, which makes things certainly a lot easier. So yeah, that's one of the things that we do with the Ketamine Academy. And sort of how Ketamine Academy got started was within just a few weeks of me opening up my practice. We started getting phone calls from other CRNAs and other medical professionals saying, hey, I really like what you're doing. I'm seeing all your posts on social media. Can you teach me how to do it? And so I started taking phone calls just for free for many months, or several months, just answering questions, but it started to get really time consuming. And after complaining about it one night to my wife, I was like, man, I'm taking a lot of phone calls. I'm not charging anybody anything. This is really getting to be a lot, because I was still working full time. I was still part-time Navy reservist. I still ran this clinic part-time, and I was answering all these phone calls for free and emails. So my wife was like, why don't you just create a course? And I was like, that's a good idea.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing how our wives come up with some of the best ideas.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And so we had actually started another course. It was called Nurse Academy before. So we had a little bit of experience in that. Okay. We tried to create a nursing school entrance exam review business. Didn't do so well, but we learned a lot of the ropes as far as creating online courses, what it takes and stuff like that. So this sort of fit well. We knew that there was demand for this, unlike the other one, that we could charge a reasonable rate, higher than $9 to $20 an hour, which you can't really make a business out of that unless your volume is so high. Yeah. So we decided just to go for it. We created an online course. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, I mean, and obviously that's probably changed from the moment you started it to now. What are the changes that you've seen through that process? What is the feedback you've gotten on the course, and how have you changed the course as a result?
Oh gosh. Yeah. The course, when we first started, was really small. It was maybe 10 hours of content. Basically, we took all the forms and templates from our clinic. We uploaded those there. We created basically mostly written text lessons. At that point, when we first launched, about 80% of the course was reading only. It was all text-based, along with our forms and templates. And then we did some live calls, like Zoom calls, to answer questions. And so that was the origin of the course. We soon got feedback that, hey, we really like videos. We want PowerPoint presentations and all this stuff. So we really never stopped making constant improvements. So we always get feedback from our students. Now we have, the course is, 98% videos. We've gotten CE approval through the AANA. We've now got 40.5 CEs for the business version. And on our next update, it's going to be even higher.
Wow.
So just basically listening to feedback and constantly adding more and more stuff. Students wanted contracts for their collaborating physician. We're working on that now. They wanted job posts for the nurse practitioners that they would hire. So we basically created a business in a box now, and we're still constantly improving it, constantly adding to it. We've got many, many dozens and dozens of forms in there to just make it as simple as possible, because when you're creating, protocols, job posts, all consents, everything that goes into it, it's a massive endeavor. And so we just aim to shorten that length of time it takes to do all that by providing everything in a template. So people can use our templates, recommend that they have them reviewed, like by an attorney, to make sure that they're good for their state. But it's, 90%, 95% of that work is already done for them. Yep.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Now, you also have the IV Therapy Academy. And so can you go into some of those differences between maybe that lesson plan and that course of action versus the ketamine side? Because obviously, IV therapy, that sounds a lot more all encompassing, but there's got to be some key differences.
Yeah. So the IV therapy we teach is IV nutritional therapy. We're going to be doing some chelation and plaque X type courses as well. Glutathione. So it's more of the holistic type of practice. It's not, IV administration of antibiotics or IV chemotherapy or anything like that. So it's all vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, nutrients, detoxifiers, things like that. So that's what we teach in the IV Academy. And the reason that came about is because we had patients coming into our ketamine clinic saying, hey, I keep hearing about these Myers cocktails, these vitamin B infusions. They heard that they might help with treatment-resistant depression. Do you guys offer that? And we're like, no, we don't. But then we hired a nurse practitioner who actually bought the practice from me. She still works with us. She's actually our partner now in the IV Therapy Academy.
Oh, cool.
But she was the expert in IV therapy, or she wanted to become the expert. So she did a bunch of research, took some courses, implemented it in the clinic, and then we decided to partner on a course. And so that's how that sort of evolved. We were just listening to demand, listening to what people wanted, and creating the content.
Well, that's what entrepreneurs do. That's what you have to do when you've got a business. You got to be able to serve somebody and give them what they want or need. And so it sounds like you've really had your ear to the ground with all of these things along the way. So that's a really that's just a fantastic thing, a very good lesson for people.
Yeah, that's one of the things I feel like we do exceptionally well is we're on the forefront of things. We're constantly listening for what the next thing is that people want to learn about, that our students want to learn about, and we're making improvements. We're even building out new courses based on what people want. So yeah, we're really good listeners for feedback and then for new content for sure.
So I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball here.
Sure.
What do you see from this field? What do you see moving forward? How do you see this changing?
In terms of ketamine, in terms of just online courses?
Ketamine is fine. Let's go with ketamine.
Yeah. So ketamine definitely evolving pretty quickly. When I started my practice in 2017, like I said, the literature was more sparse than it is now. Now you got all sorts of clinical trials going on. You have an FDA approved sort of version of ketamine. It's the racemic enantiomer, S-ketamine, which is FDA approved for treatment-resistant depression in nasal spray form. That's pretty new. You're starting to see all sorts of different delivery devices. So the money is in patenting new formulations, new delivery devices. So you see big pharmaceutical companies going after that angle. So there's patches now that are in various stages of FDA approval, where they've got tiny little microscopic pins that deliver the basically penetrate the dermis and deliver ketamine on a more even keel sort of basis. That's some new stuff going on. So the field is expanding rapidly. You're starting to see things like Osmind software specifically for ketamine clinics. There's now, I would venture to guess, nearly 1,000 practices across the United States offering ketamine. And that's actually one of the reasons why I wanted to create the course, is because, when we started, you would see the price of a single ketamine infusion. Most of them were $600 to $1,000 for a single ketamine infusion. And we thought that was absolutely outrageous. So when we started, we were actually like, we need to bring this to the masses, and we need to price it so that everybody can afford it. So we were actually the lowest priced ketamine clinic in the US that we knew of, at under $300 an infusion when we started. Now, that was great when we started, but we did have to bring our prices up a little bit as we started to bring on more staff, because obviously your expenses go up. But we were still one of the cheapest ketamine infusion practices in the US. And now you'll see across the board that instead of $600 to $1,000 per infusion, most clinics are in the $350 to $450 sort of range. So prices have gone way down, and it's much more accessible now.
That's cool. Now, how often does somebody come in for a treatment?
Yeah, so the typical protocol, which is the one that most people are using, it's JAMA Psychiatry published it for treatment-resistant depression. It's 6 infusions over 2 weeks. And most clinicians will start right about, the protocol recommends starting at 0.5 milligrams per kilogram. But most clinicians feel that that's not effective. You need to really titrate higher. So most will start there and then quickly titrate up. A lot of clinicians anecdotally believe that the dissociation is a key part of the antidepressant effect. So they typically are titrating to dissociation. And there's been a lot of lectures on this from some real leaders in the field clinically. Yep.
Okay. Now, and this is, you mentioned that this was kind of a self-pay type deal. Mm-hmm. Do you see that changing? Do you see insurance all of a sudden starting to accept this as more of a uniform practice and being willing to pay for it?
There's work towards doing that. There's the ketamine task force, which is started by a former nurse practitioner, and I believe she was Army or Navy officer, but she has complex regional pain syndrome, and she has a blog about it and things like that. So she's a big advocate for getting ketamine covered by insurance, and so she's really pushing hard to get CPT codes developed specifically for ketamine, and working on that insurance coverage part of it. We'll probably potentially see that maybe years down the road. It takes forever. The problem is that the FDA wants to see, phase 1, 2, 3 clinical trials, which cost a fortune. You're talking in the millions of dollars. And because it's a generic drug, there's not a whole lot of people willing to fund that type of research when there's no payout at the end. So that's why you see the pharmaceutical companies, rather than, trying to patent ketamine, they can't, because it's already been patented, the patent expired. They're trying to create, mixtures of ketamine with another drug, these proprietary formulations, proprietary delivery devices. So those will probably get approved faster than the IV. But data showing that the plain old IV is the most effective so far. It's just not covered by insurance. Yep.
Now, how many providers do you have that are getting both of your courses, and they're trying to do both, the IV therapy and the ketamine therapy at their clinics? Is that a common thing?
Oh yeah, for sure. Because they're both set up for IVs, and it just sort of makes sense. If you have an IV chair that's sitting there empty,
sure,
it should, if you're a sound business person and you're trying to grow your practice, you want to have all square footage of your business should be generating as much revenue as possible, whenever possible. So if you have an empty chair, no patients in it, you're already set up for IVs. It's kind of a no-brainer to provide other IV services that you can offer and keep those chairs full. Yep.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, as we mentioned, you're also the host of the Healthcare Entrepreneur Academy podcast, and you've done over 200 episodes so far. So you have a little bit of a head start on me. I'm hovering around the 50 range right now, but I seriously love the idea behind your show. What made you ultimately take this jump into the podcast space?
So it was after starting the ketamine clinic, starting the course, seeing some success there, and realizing that there's a heck of a lot more opportunity than sort of a lot of us have been brainwashed to believe that's out there. So as a CRNA, you're sort of, you've got these blinders on, and you think you have to go into the operating room every day, wake up at 5 a.m, drive to work your 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, whatever hour shift you're working, and then drive home. To me, I didn't really particularly enjoy that after doing that for many years. I got burnt out extremely quick, probably partially my own fault because I was working so many hours. I usually was working 60 hours, 70 hours a week or more. Yeah. So that was just an attempt to pay off the student loans. But to me, there's not a whole lot of freedom in that. There's not a whole lot of extra opportunity. Your income is capped, right? The only way you can make more is to work more hours. At some point, I mean, you can move to those independent practice states like I did, get a little boost there.
But you trade time for money. I mean, that's
trading time for money. Yep. And so I decided that I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. There's other opportunities. We're figuring this stuff out. We're generating a substantial amount of revenue through online businesses. And I just started to get really passionate about it. So ended up working on an MBA, and then I started finishing an MBA, and then I started the podcast. And I just wanted to network with other entrepreneurs in the healthcare space who were doing other things, just to open up my eyes to what else was out there. And at the same time, open up everybody else's eyes. You don't have to just be the CRNA who punches that time clock. There's so many other things you could do, whether it's a side hustle, because maybe you love being a CRNA, you love going into the OR and helping patients. There's nothing wrong with that, just not for me full-time. So there's so many opportunities out there. That's what I really wanted to bring to light with the podcast. So there's a lot of benefits to podcasting too. Not only we get to, network, share some knowledge with all the listeners, gain some knowledge yourself, but you're networking, and that's a huge benefit too. You're meeting some pretty cool entrepreneurs. Like I was telling you pre-show, we've interviewed, people who have just started in entrepreneurship all the way up to founders of billion-dollar companies on the podcast. So many smart people out there doing some pretty big moves, and you never know where that one connection or that one tidbit of advice can take you. It could help skyrocket your business. So I love doing the podcast. Yep.
Yeah. I think you touched on a big thing. I always loved going to conferences as a CRNA, and it was about the networking, just finding out what's going on in other places across the country, and seeing how you can incorporate something into either your own practice, or you just, you're kind of keeping your finger on the pulse of what's happening in other places. And, it allows you to make better choices for yourself and for your own career, I think. And it really can open your eyes. Like I've had so many people on here that are doing such different things on this particular podcast. And so, and like I said, you're way ahead of me. So you've heard, hundreds of stories. So it's really incredible what you're doing on your podcast. Now you've got the Healthcare Entrepreneur Academy as well. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so that's our newest brand. We started with just the podcast, and we've been doing that podcast for a little over 2 years now. So we're on season 3, and so we started with just that, but we're actually creating more educational content. So we've had a lot of requests from people to ask, hey, how do I create my own online course? How can I do this online coaching consulting course thing that you're doing? Because I see you figured it out and you're doing well. So we've created the Course Creator Academy, and that's still a work in progress. We ran 2 beta groups through that to get a lot of feedback, so that way we can make some improvements. And so we're working on those improvements. We've also got some feedback from some people who are interested in our courses, but not totally sure if that's the direction they want to go. So they want to start a cash-based practice. They don't want to deal with insurance, but they don't know what types of services they can or should offer. So we're about to launch a new course called the Cash Practice course, where we teach you how to start the practice, and then we expose you to all these different things that you could be doing in your practice, like ketamine, like IV therapy, like women's health, like hormone replacement, like testosterone replacement, like Botox or aesthetics, PRP, stem cells. So we're going to have many lessons on all those different topics, just to provide some exposure to help those who want to start a practice sort of figure out the direction that they want to go in.
Yeah. Very cool, man. That's got to be an exciting time getting something like that off the ground. I'm in awe of it. And, having created a bit of a course myself for apartment investing, I know the amount of time and effort it takes to put into something like that. And so I really commend you for creating a course to teach people how to create courses, because there can be a very systematic process that you can take and just kind of grease the wheels a little bit for yourself. It doesn't have to be as hard as we sometimes want to make it.
Yes, exactly. And creating the course is actually only half the battle. The other half is selling the course. If you can't sell the course, which is much harder than some might think, if you don't have a plan and a process in place to sell your course, then you just wasted a ton amount of time trying to put something together that you can't move. That's what happened with our first course, the Nurse Academy. And so we took everything that we've learned that didn't work, all the stuff that did work to help us generate 3 million in revenue from our online courses, and we're packaging that up into our Course Creator Academy just to show people the ropes. Creating the course is great, but you got to sell it in order for it to be worthwhile. So we teach that whole process. Yep.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, so Jason, I just, in wrapping up here, I would just want to find out, like, what has been the most rewarding part of all of this for you?
Definitely, without a doubt, the most rewarding part is seeing our students finish and actually take the leap of faith that it takes, overcome their fear, because that's always a problem for so many people. They sort of get in this analysis paralysis phase and that they can't escape. They let the fear sort of consume them. Well, what if? Well, what if? Well, what if? And then they never take any action. The most rewarding thing is when we have those students that take the action, they start their practice, or in the case of the Course Creator Academy, like Alicia Quanti, another CRNA who started the 1099 CRNA Success Academy, who made that leap, started her online course and coaching and training program. That's what really lights me up. I love seeing that. Yep.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, this has just been a great conversation. I really appreciate your time today. How can folks get a hold of you? You've obviously got several things going on. There's got to be a few ways people can get a hold of you.
Probably the best way to get some free content is just to go to jasonduprat.com/listen. That's where you can check out all the different podcast episodes. And what's cool is we just a few months ago added a search bar. So if you want to search for a keyword like real estate, like 1099, because we did interview Alicia on there too, you can search by podcast topic really easily. A lot of podcasts don't have any search features on their site, which makes it kind of frustrating if you're trying to look for a specific topic. But we have that now, so you can listen to all of them, or you can search for different topics that you're interested in. That's probably the best way to just learn more about entrepreneurship and get some free content. I'm always on social media. Facebook is where I'm at almost all the time. Pretty much every day I'm on Facebook. We have all of our student groups on Facebook, so I'm always on Facebook. So if you message me on Facebook, Jason A. Duprat, and make sure you get the personal profile. There's a business profile that we run ads from. If you message that one, I won't see those messages because only our marketing team has access to that.
Okay. Very cool. Well, Jason, I have to thank you again for being on the show today. This has just been really great.
Yeah, Bobby, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
I am so impressed by Jason's ability to examine what he's done and learn from his own mistakes over time. It's clear that he's such a driver and he gets so much enjoyment out of helping others. I feel like I do with my kids. I just want to bottle up some of that energy that he's got. But that speaks to the larger point of doing the things that personally motivate you. You can tell when someone is passionate about what they're learning and doing because they just exude excitement. I hope you're able to find that for yourself. That's going to do it for the show today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. And if you're interested, I hope you take up Jason on his offering to reach out to him and learn more about what he's into. This is Bobby Jones signing off, and I'll see you on the next episode. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Plan B CRNA podcast. If you haven't already subscribed and reviewed the show, I'd be honored if you took the extra time. It really helps to expand our reach and get the word out about the show. If you're a CRNA who is interested in sharing your story on our podcast, I'd love to have you. Please email me at bobby@oncallinvestments.com for more information. This episode was brought to you by On-Call Capital. They are dedicated to helping providers like you develop passive income and generational wealth through investments in the apartment and alternative investment spaces. Feel free to check out their website at www.oncallinvestments.com and subscribe to their free educational email series. You can find On-Call Capital on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also check out our YouTube page, where you'll find all of the show episodes along with other educational videos. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.